Greetings, everybody. It's Jim. I have been waiting anxiously to give you my review of this product. Ever since I got done doing the unboxing video and I clicked that button to send the video off into the internet ether, my nose got stuck into this rulebook and I did not come up for air until I found out what it had, what it didn't have, how it affected gameplay, and how it affected the fantasy trip vision in general. There's a lot to unpack and it's an interesting story. So today, I'm going to be sharing with you my review of Dragons of Underearth from Metagaming. So let's give a little capsule review for those of you who did not see the unboxing video. Basically, Steve, as we know, is the author of the Fantasy Trip series, whether it be the melee combat module, the wizard expansion, or the full-fledged role-playing game in the Labyrinth. It was all designed under Steve's pen. However, it was not published under Steve's banner. It did not exist at the time. What did exist at the time was a company called Metagaming, also in Austin, Texas, run by a man named Howard Thompson. Now, Howard had some criticisms of Steve's vision of the fantasy trip. He thought it was too complicated. All right, so he wanted it to be simpler. And soon, though, afterwards, and I don't know anything else about it, but Steve and Howard decided to part ways. Steve ended up with the rights to Ogre and GEV and maybe a few other things, and Howard kept the rights to the fantasy trip. And so, having the rights and having to go for his right to go forward now, basically, he created Dragons of Underworth, designed by Keith Gross. And so, this is the fruition of that vision of trying to make the fantasy trip simpler. So, did it succeed? Let's go over that. So, this first section is all about all those things that I thought were interesting, but didn't sway me either way about whether they were good for the system or bad for the system. Okay. Some of them can still be applied into the fantasy trip, some of them can't. So anyway, great strength is one of these items. Basically, the idea that more butch and swole you get, the less you have to worry about the hindrances to dexterity and movement anymore. All right, and I like that a bit. I definitely like it for movement. I'm kind of about the dexterity. I wonder about it a little bit because technically, when you reach level 18 strength, 22 strength, or 26 strength, not only do you technically gain a strength point, but you actually gain a point of dexterity for all intents and purposes. Well, and I think, man, is that a little bit too powerful? But then again, I'm a guy who likes to give strength more meaning because so many people like to dig on it, saying it's kind of a dump stat, which I totally disagree with. But nonetheless, this would be a good thing to add to say, oh, you get a little bonus if you get stronger to encourage its growth. Now, speaking of growth, we're looking at the experience points here, and now this is absolute proof, not just because of the Force to Hod video that I did that had all those guys with like really big attribute point totals. They fully expected it here. In this, they talk about increasing attributes up to level 55 and even beyond. But generally, they were talking, it looks like anywhere from 41 to 50 would have been easily attainable for any length of time. So I found that pretty interesting. Now, what's also of note is the experience points, how they're gained. You gain one experience points per hit on an enemy, and if you deal a killing blow, it gives you 1 point per dexterity of the enemy, which is a kind of a weird way to tally the enemy. I would think maybe just add them all up and just take the attribute total and divide it by three. But they chose dexterity, I guess, to do it simpler. They had to choose something. Strength might be too much because a lot of monsters are really that high. And IQ might not matter because a lot of them are just that monsters, right? So I guess that makes sense to a point. The skill, the talents veteran and warrior are replaced with toughness. Warrior gave, and I was right on this. Warrior gave you a point of armor, and veteran gave you 2 points. They just replaced it with word toughness in the fantasy trip as it is now. And the weirdest one, which I don't know if I agree with or not, is thrown weapons. Adjacent figures are not in the way of the thrower. So basically, you can kind of throw over them. But I'm like, well, he's right there. It's your friend, maybe. But it doesn't say anything about an enemy. I would think an enemy could get in the way. I kind of like it the way it is right now. It doesn't bother me. But you can disagree with me in the comments down below and tell me why. So that's the first section. Let's go on to the next. So this next section is where Howard Thompson and Keith Gross's vision of making the fantasy trip quicker and simpler come to fruition. And it's hard to argue that they don't accomplish their goal in some way. Okay. Let's just go over these and I'll tell you about what I think about them overall afterwards. First off, forget flying. That's out the door. That makes that simpler. No hand to hand. That's a big one. No hand to hand. They have unarmed combat, but it's no hand to hand at all. Poles are simplified. If you weren't engaged and you are engaged just this turn and you have a pole weapon, it's double damage for that turn only. Simple. Simultaneous combat is the big one. No dexterity order, not whatsoever. Okay, it is the person who lost initiative goes first. The person that won initiative goes next, and it doesn't matter. It's all simultaneous. So even if person A kills person B still gets their last licks. Everybody gets their turn. Period. That's going to make combat a lot faster. So it does make things faster. It does get rid of some of the more complicated things about in the rules. But the thing is, it does have its drawbacks as well. I mean, first off, being it's losing a lot of tactically rich flavor that Steve's Vision has. All right. However, as somebody who's actually had to teach people games to keep his store alive and keep food on my plate, that was my only job. I didn't have a store and just had I was working as an executive somewhere, as and using the store as a tax write-off. I'm actually had to live on it. And I'm telling you, when you're teaching somebody a game and they go silk 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 hiccup. The more hiccups you have, it's exponential, the faster they'll get turned off on it. And the thing is, the fantasy trip is definitely silk, 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 silk. Hand to hand is the hiccup. All right. It's not that it's hard, but it's not something that a new player can remember in their mind if you ask them to do it again next turn. You're going to need to hold their hand again. That makes them think, oh, I don't understand this game. That's a bad thing. So, in a way, I'm not saying I tactically agree with thee. Okay, I like Steve's Vision. It's just that if I were to make a basic set and an advanced set, that might be an idea there. That's not without its merit at all. Okay, now let's go on to the next section of where this whole fails, though. Now, this next part is where I think the dragons of Underearth not only fail, but fall on their face and shoot themselves in the foot along the way, according to their original vision. All right, the first of which being this map board. All right, now if you recall my unboxing video, I unveiled this and I said to myself, first thing, this is a multi-purpose map, isn't it? And it's going to cause problems. And I'm absolutely right. That's what it was. It's like 4 layers to the thing. Sometimes the walls are there. The shaded areas mean something sometimes they don't. It's just a mess. It's a tactical mistake farm waiting to happen. I mean, it's not going to be fun when somebody makes a tactical mistake based on that. Now, the next thing is when I was going through the rules, the natural progression is to think and to assume that they're wanting you to make a character along the way. They start with attribute points and talk about spells, then talents and such. But when they got to spells, they said, here's a list of spells, and they list them all. But they say, we'll describe them in the back. And they did the same thing with talents. It's like, for a newbie, you wouldn't even know what they do. You need that description. So I suspect something. I got more to talk about, but I suspect something here, which is really weird. But about why that was done. So the next thing was optional rules. There was a lot of optional rules. Now it's not unusual to see games have a rule and then say, "Hey, use this as an option." But again, the original idea in my mind was this was made for new people. All right. That means with that many optional rules, if you wanted to make it simpler, you take them all out, you put it in a separate section called advanced rules or whatever. There was enough there to call them advanced rules and just go with it and keep the core stuff there to keep it small, fresh, and crisp for the person to understand, right? That wasn't done. There was a lot of optional rules and they were all over the place. So with these things combined, I'm really asking myself, are you really thinking that Dragons of Underearth was actually promoted as something for simpler so kids could understand more? Or was this actually for people who already played the fantasy trip and try to convert them into this new vision? You know, unfortunately, the truth is the truth. Once you play Steve's version, you're not going back. I mean, I can understand using this if you want to play a 30 to 40 man game. But you know what? What they could have done, and this would have been the simplest version because there's not enough in here to warrant this box set. There is not. If they would have taken the simultaneous combat, no hand to hand, and simplified pole damage, and they just wanted to use that and say, hey, let's have some mass combat rules, they already had the rights to the fantasy trip. They could have just attached it to that, made another supplement, and called it mass combat rules. Well, even then, that's still not enough. It's too small. but they could have attached it to the next edition of the rules at the very least. So they did not need to do this. So in a way, it's a really interesting story, and I wonder what the main motivation was because they already had the rights to the fantasy trip. Could all put on my tinfoil hat and start grinding away at some thoughts, but I think I'll just let you guys contemplate what it all means in the comments below. Again, folks, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next video.